I want to thank Senator Blessing for being here with us today so we could talk about some of the things that are going on in the State House in Columbus. Thanks so much for joining us.
Thank you, Dana.
So there's a lot going up, and normally at this point of a program, I say, gee, those of us here in Cincinnati don't get to see what's happening in Columbus. Well, thanks to the coronavirus, we actually get to see a little bit more of what's happening in Columbus. But it's still really focused on one topic, and there's actually a lot more going on up there. So I'm hoping you can give us some highlights and let us know what we can keep our eyes out for.
Yeah, absolutely. Thank you, Dana. It's we just started the new 134th General Assembly, and I would point out for viewers that I'm not sure it's all of them because we have a number of select committees that aren't, actual full standing committees. But the committee that I chair, Ways and Means, as well as Education, Finance, they're all televised. Folks can watch these committees from the comfort of their home and see what's going on in Columbus as if they were there. So that's wonderful. But we do have a number of hot topics. Just this past Monday, the executive budget was released, the so-called Blue Book, and it's a summary of what the governor is planning on. How shall we say? Putting into this budget. So it was about a $1 billion increase over the last go round, which would have been 2019 when we passed the state operating budget. And a lot of that, is meant to help, Ohio businesses, communities recover from COVID-19, so on and so forth. What might be confusing to a lot of folks is, you see an increase in the budget and you're like, well, where is that money coming from? Well, there's a couple things to bear in mind. For one, revenue estimates have come in actually better than anticipated, which is probably comes as a surprise to a lot of people. The other part of it is that over this past year, fiscal year 21 and 20, or past two fiscal years, I might say, we in Ohio have to have a balanced budget. So there were prior budget cuts to sort of, try to work with the fact that we were worried about revenues. Looking at the revenues from March and April, the state just got slaughtered, but we recovered relatively quickly. So because of that, there's more revenue to work with this budget. Now, some of the hot ticket items you might see, there was an increase in the license registration fee, title fee. That's to help the state highway patrol. So that's when you go to register your vehicle, it's going to be a $10 increase for that. There's going to be a significant jump in spending on state Medicaid. That should really come as no surprise because, again, we're in the middle of a pandemic, and it is our largest ticket item. There's a number of low-income Ohioans that need health coverage assistance. One thing that is, and I'll get to it in a moment. Actually, you know what? We'll get it now. I can't go too in depth on it because it will take a long time. But one thing that is neat about this budget is that you have some extra health and wellness dollars for K through 12. But for the most part, K through 12 funding, the school funding formula has been left untouched, which, people might freak out and say, well, I thought we were going to address that. We are. I have to thank the governor on this one in that he is, looking to the General Assembly to craft the school funding formula this cycle. Obviously, the Senate is working on it. I will be the point person for that. We'll have to have another one of these Zoom calls, or maybe at that point an in-person meeting to go over it ad nauseum if anybody's interested in that. But the House will have their proposal as well, and we shall see how that plays out. But I would tell people that despite Medicaid being the largest budget item, a lot of federal dollars come in for that. It's not as much the case with education, which is our largest state GRF. budget ticket item. And that's something to keep in mind as we go forward with the school funding formula. I would say this, I think the focus is going to be on, the formula amount, which you may hear the phrase base cost tossed around. The formula amount is right now $6,020 per student. That's what when people talk about the cost to educate a child, that's typically the number that they're throwing out. Although there's a lot more to it, obviously, than just that $6,020. The other issue, which is more pressing, equally pressing, is the issue of the caps and the guarantees and how we deal with them. Those are the mechanisms by which certain school districts, if they lose a significant amount of their students, the measure is ADM, average daily membership. There's sort of a floor that they can't lose more school funding, than prior years, depending on how much they've lost. Conversely, there's the gain cap, which says you can't grow beyond a certain amount based on your ADM. So those are, and they kind of complement each other in the sense that if you're going to have a guarantee, presumably you're going to have a cap there to ensure that spending doesn't go, or at least that was my understanding when it was implemented about 6 years ago, was that it was meant to sort of keep the funding relatively steady. But those are the two issues that need to be addressed and will be addressed. In addition to that, irrespective of whether it's a Senate or House initiative, and I have to think it'll be a compromise between both chambers, as it always is. Both sides agree at this point that we need to get beyond this system of deducting dollars for state scholarships from a school district and sending them elsewhere. I mean, scholarships are one thing. I firmly believe that they will remain. When I say scholarships, I'm talking Ed Choice. I'm talking John Peterson autism scholarships. The difference is this time, students will be funded where they're educated, not where they reside. And you see this deduction business that causes school treasurers a lot of grief. So I suspect that will be addressed. But other than that, I mean, there'll just be a number of, in the budget proper, aid packages to, local communities, small businesses, a lot of the industries that were hit the hardest in the pandemic. So bars, restaurants, hotel lodging industry, indoor entertainment like movie theaters, folks like that really, because of the the health orders have just been really hit hard. But it's kind of new for me this go round, though I've served on the House Finance Committee in years past. We do not get it first. The House is the first body to craft their version of the budget, and the Senate goes second. So I will be closely following it, but not directly involved with it as I had been in the past. I'll stop there briefly if you had any questions on the budget or wanted to raise any issues there.
I just want to highlight, because you covered an awful lot in that brief. I think one of the first things I want to highlight is, yes, people can watch all of these meetings. Sometimes we forget that this access has always been there. It's not just because of COVID, but I think COVID made us realize more that all of these public meetings are televised. They are recorded. You can watch them. The Ohio channel has them all on their website, and you can just click your way through every committee meeting and know exactly what people are talking about. And we just hit some highlights here so that if you don't have time to click through every committee meeting, you at least be caught up. But that some of these extra projects, these one-time grants for bars and restaurants and relief, is that due to extra money that we're getting from the federal government? That's kind of a little extra boost.
Absolutely, no question about it. There's more federal dollars this cycle than there have been in cycles past. Now, whether that remains the case, I that remains to be seen. But we're dealing with this budget cycle, so we can't be as concerned about that going forward. our goal is simply to, ensure that the budget is balanced as we are constitutionally required to do that, and make sure that those who have been impacted the most by COVID-19, see some aid and relief.
And you covered this in much more detail, but just to highlight that school funding, folks maybe thought they would see in this initial proposal a new mechanism for how schools, because we talked about it last year before COVID.
Right.
We thought that was going to be the big thing we talked about last year, and of course,
Right.
Other things happened.
Well, I would say this, that even then, there's a recognition that since it's the largest budget item, it makes the most sense to do it in the context of the budget. Despite, and I'm well aware that a number of people wanted to see, myself included, wanted to see it done at the end of last General Assembly, but looking at this holistically, it was better to do it in the context of the budget.
And by not addressing it himself, the governor said specifically he's fully expecting this to be hashed out in detail by committee, and that's why it's not in there.
Well, he didn't say that. Well,
okay.
maybe he did, and I missed it. But,
okay.
But I think. But when I see something like that, I take it to mean that the governor is going to defer to the General Assembly on something like this, which makes sense. I mean, DeWine has, generally worked well with the legislature. So that's my take on it.
And only because we covered this in great detail last year. So Ed Choice, there are so many, that's not just a one-line thing, and we won't even try to explain it in this short program, but when people say Ed Choice, just do a little reading, because that Ed Choice actually responds to several different programs, and usually folks are just talking about one of them and not the other ones, and that can be confusing.
Oh, it gets even more confusing in that traditional Ed Choice is the mechanism by which you, depending on a school district's performance, the money, they're Ed Choice eligible. The students can take the scholarship, which that money is deducted from the school district and then sent to the educating school. Ed Choice expansion, which is also referred to as an Ed Choice scholarship, is
actually
a directly funded, low income scholarship that is, in terms of how it works, practically speaking, is entirely different. But since they have the same name, it definitely is a source of confusion.
One of the things that we also talked about in relation to this last year was the possibility of overhauling how those schools were evaluated when it came to their performance. Is that something that will be part of this discussion or another discussion?
So I don't believe it'll be a budget discussion. I think all eyes are on the budget right now. That's going to suck a lot of air out of the room. However, it is the number 2 priority of myself. I would imagine a number of other senators, and quite frankly, from what I've been hearing, a lot of good work has been done by interested parties in terms of trying to, find consensus on it. The one sticking point, and it's so simple, simple to understand, not necessarily simple to solve, is do we stick with the letter grade system, or do we move to a dashboard or some sort of other system to show how overall the school district is performing? That's the sticking point. I'm hearing they're close, but again, my focus has been on school funding at the moment. So I told them, get back to me when you have a little more, because it seems to be an either or thing at this point. And if you can't get consensus, it's going to be very difficult to move forward with it.
So how long does this budget process take? When will we expect to see things?
So the budget has to be done by June 30th of this year. The state operating budget. There's a number of other budget bills in there. Transportation budget has to be done by the end of March. Then there's the Industrial Commission and BWC budgets. Usually those are done very quickly and are not controversial in any way. This last go round, there was a, sort of a sea change in thinking regarding the BWC budget, because there was language in there regarding covering first responders for PTSD under workers' comp, which, that's potentially a lot of money. The business community that largely funds BWC, or that fund, had some issues with it. From what I'm hearing, things are getting worked out. Just pointing that out is it was sort of an outlier in my experience. BWC budget was always very quick to go through. Same thing with the Industrial Commission. That went through pretty quickly as well. But yeah, end of June is when it should be done. As far as being out of the house, April, Mayish is typically when that occurs. We have a very short timeline, Senate side, and yeah, we'll see what we can do. But the budget is it's for 2 years, so it'll be fiscal year 22 and 23, which will take us all the way through to, let's see here, June of 23.
So if viewers want to get details, since we're going pretty quickly here, about the budget, about anything else that we're talking about what's going on, what's a good place for them to go look for that? I'm
glad you brought that up. There is actually a link. You know what? I will send it to you, which has the blue book. I should probably know the history of why it's called the blue book, but there's a blue book, a red book, and a green book that are snapshots in time of the budget as it goes through from introduction all the way through to enactment. But the blue book will give you, an absolute, just incredibly detailed view of the state operating budget. I mean, it is a huge document, so much so that the finance folks have said might not want to print it out because it's that big of a document. But if you want to know how everything works with the state budget, it's the best document that we have right now. And it is the executive budget summary and details of it. So
excellent. And for the next time we meet, we'll have to look up the history of why it's a blue book. Now I suddenly really want to know. So just before we finish, some of the things that in these budgets, we see them on a broad level, on a state level. Sometimes it includes local projects that we're going to see in our neighborhoods. And one of those is in Coleraine.
Yes. So if you're talking about the Mega Playland project, that was actually part of the capital appropriations budget. And just so you know, Jeff Mills and the trustees have been, banging the drum for that for some time, and not just current trustees. Former trustees have been absolutely on board with this, and really everybody across the aisle, across the political spectrum, has been in support of this. But yeah, very proud to say that we got a significant number of dollars for that project. Again, I can't thank Jeff Mills enough for his efforts on this, because to give you an idea of the process, we work very closely with the Cincinnati business community, the CBC, determining which projects are going to get funding, how that's going to look. And that's very important because the capital appropriations budget, there's a lot of rules to it in terms of projects needing to be bondable. They have to have a nexus to a state agency. So for example, if it's a park project, that would be a nexus to the Department of Natural Resources, things like that. What's crazy is a lot of people don't realize these community projects, they get the most attention, but it's maybe 0.1 or 0.2% of the capital appropriations budget at large. It's a $2.5 billion budget, yet the community project pot statewide is 100 to 150 million. So an order of magnitude less. But that having been said, getting that money for Coleraine was one of the easiest and best things that I feel that I've done in Columbus. It's
such a central point for the Coleraine community, that park. It's not just like, when people hear a playground, this is a park that's a center of where Coleraine meets. So, and I'm excited to watch it take shape. They've really worked the history of Coleraine into their design. So I've been hearing so much in Coleraine about how excited they are. So last thing I want to do is I always remind people that you are available for their questions, for their concerns, that you want them to email you. So is there one spot that they can get in touch with you?
They should go to my page on the Ohio Senate's website. I'll shoot you that link. One thing I would say, people, I don't know if they know this is available, but if you come up there, during a session day, typically a Wednesday, sometimes Tuesdays, but I'll be up there with committee and interested party meetings, so on and so forth. If you walk into the State House proper, my office isn't, it's not like a gazillion gates or anything. You just pop right in. If I'm there, I'll talk. And not a lot of people know that. It's very, very, very accessible. And besides tours, there's just a lot of neat things to do at the State House if anybody's interested in visiting.
I think if people only remember one thing, that is what I want them to remember, is that what's going on in Columbus and the people who are there representing us in Columbus, like you, are accessible. We can watch your committee meetings on the Ohio Channel. We can shoot you an email when we have a question. And you have talked to us in the past about how some of your legislation is directly influenced by that communication. So sometimes we feel like we are not influential just as one person down here in Hamilton County, and we are, because we have access. You are representing us in the Senate in Ohio.
Absolutely happy to do it.
Well, I will not keep you. I know you have another meeting, but I want to thank you so much for taking some time. And as always, you've been very supportive of us here at Waycross and our work to keep everyone connected and updated about what's going on in Columbus.
My pleasure, Dana. Anytime.